June 11th, 2022. Well, I want to address an event that happened just the other day here on Thursday evening about the so-called January 6th commission, this partisan group that's been put together to attack Donald Trump and what they come up with. But before I get into that, I would like to mention that, of course, that yesterday we had another record inflation number of 8.6% for the overall year-to-year inflation. And literally it was up 1% for the month of May alone, which, multiplying by 12, that gives you 12% a year. That's the monthly rate, although there can be factors which could make that a little bit exaggerated in terms of what it really means. The core inflation's at 6% year over year, which is not as much. Now that takes out the food and energy, and of course it's specifically food and energy that are surging right now above everything else, and tend to be kind of maybe drivers of the core to some extent, especially the energy. The energy drives food and things such as fertilizer costs and transportation costs. So you see what I'm saying. So that's not a good picture at all. Things are continuing to get worse. But I want to get on back to this January 6th commission. Perhaps we should have a commission more on why the economy is in bad shape than this. But at any rate, I thought it was worth discussing a little bit. I hope, put it this way, I watched it so maybe you didn't have to. And I can kind of give you a little bit of what I think about it. One thing I would say is, given that all the major networks covered this in prime time, as well as, of course, you would expect the news networks to tend to do it, except for Fox News itself. They did put it on the Fox Business Channel, which I suppose has a pretty low rating in the evening anyhow. So that's probably watched more during the working day. So that was a minor sacrifice for them. But I thought it was kind of interesting. It was sort of Fox against the world. I mean, even Newsmax was covering this thing live, basically. But anyhow, interesting situation. But I do think it shows you how politically biased the mass media really is. Could you imagine if the Republicans were in power and they did a similar kind of hit job on a Democrat, that they would cover the thing live like this? I tend to doubt it. And they certainly wouldn't applaud it when they made their commentary. By the way, if you like these videos, please, give me a like. If you haven't subscribed, please do so you can give me a like, and any comments are appreciated. So that, anyway, I get into this. It's kind of interesting. One of the things they kept going on, all of a sudden the Democrats on here are, well, you'd think they're the most patriotic constitutional people we've ever seen. I mean, even though they really don't give a rip about the Constitution except when it serves their purpose, of course. But I mean, they really, I would think they were like, in the deep history of this tradition and civics, and I'm like, they are. What was that group they were supporting that was tearing down all the statues and removing statues of presidents and famous people in American history? And well, that was, I guess they forgot all about that, didn't they? But anyhow, I mean, a vice president, which was actually supporting a fund to get rioters out of jail so they could go out and riot again. Well, vice presidential candidate at the time, of course. But my point is, that the Democrats are really good. Of course, they treat us all to this normal racist stuff to begin with, which I thought was a real put-off to about any normal person. I mean, does anybody really believe that the attitudes that might have existed, say, maybe 50 or 60 years ago, are still prevalent in Mississippi today? I mean, seriously, this is all kind of, put on. But anyhow, then we get into Liz Cheney, the number one traitor to the Republican Party and the conservative movement, who's decided that her personal objections to Donald Trump triumph over everything. That her personal qualms about Trump. I mean, what about the qualms about Biden? Okay, I mean, I'll agree that Trump is a somewhat brash character on the presidential scene, unlike anything else we've seen in our lifetime. But his actual policies and achievements were quite good. I mean, the economy was a lot better. The energy supply was a lot better. Russia was not invading Ukraine at the time, creating 5 million plus refugees and blowing up everything in sight. I mean, we hadn't abandoned Afghanistan and left all the weapons to a bunch of terrorists. So, when you really look at it, we didn't have an absolute wave after wave of illegal immigrants swarming the country. So I think from a point of view, you have to give Trump a lot of support in practice if you're thinking rationally. And yes, he does tweet some strange stuff at times. Horseface was one of the classics, which I'm like, why did you do that? You knocked your polls down 5% within a week. Of course, they recovered a week later, but it was just like, what? At any rate, but that's not, that seems to be the kind of thing that got under her, the burr that got under her saddle. And from that point on, she's on a rampage. Hopefully, she'll lose her primary here in August, and we'll soon be done with her and the party. But at any rate, getting into the commission, they went through a bunch of things, and a lot of it was based on interviews that they did with various people in the administration, trying to show that the vote counting staff he had in his campaign had told him that he'd lost the election, and that basically, that one of the best parts I thought was the part where they're trying to get Jared Kushner. They were talking about that the legal staff at the White House was always threatening to resign over some particular issue, and he said, they're whining. They were always threatening to resign over something or other. I thought he handled that one pretty good. Whereas Ivanka was a little bit more intimidated, you could see, I think, with the whole process. And when they got after her about what she thought about Bill Barr's comments, she was kind of like, well, yeah, I had to trust that, and I respect that, and so forth. So, although perhaps not as astute as her husband was, I think she should have probably also said that, well, on the other hand, there was no time to actually have a real investigation of everything that happened, and a lot of crazy claims were being made, but that doesn't mean that it was really a clean election either. But that'd be kind of what I would probably said in a similar thing, because in fact, we now know from the 2,000 Mules video and that kind of investigation that there's a lot of evidence that there was substantial hanky-panky in this 2020 election, excuse me, and that, and that's why there was a lot of efforts in the states controlled by Republicans to rein in some of the things that were done in that election. And I would say that that's probably the main difference between the two elections, 16 and 2022. I've mentioned in previous videos, is that in 16, the Democrats were so confident based on polling that they were going to win that they didn't go all out to make sure in the close states. This time, they took no chances. And that's why the events that are depicted in the 2,000 Mules, which is, by the way, I have a video on that, so you might want to check that out if you haven't seen it already, although it's been my most popular video in a long time, explains, what actually happened. And then, of course, really suggest to go ahead and watch the actual movie if you have the chance or want to pay the money. It's the DVD, at least when I bought it, wasn't exactly cheap. But then after that, I found out it showed up in a lot of movie theaters, but that time it already had the DVD. So, but the point is that there really was some real fraud there, which is continuing to be brushed over. But this committee is continuing to try to present the theory, though, that somehow Trump was fundamentally behind this riot, which I don't think is quite true. So far, there's no evidence that Trump was in direct contact with the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers or the 3%ers or whatever that actually were in this attack on the riot at the Capitol. There may be people he knows that talk to some of them, but it's unclear whether or not there'll be a major breakthrough in their investigation if they can actually prove that Trump knew that there was going to be an attack on the Capitol and trying to, get in there and occupy it. I really doubt he knew that and had any involvement in that, but we'll see. I think that would be a whole different dimension, but if they had that kind of information, I mean, I would think they would do something a little more gripping than the way they started this thing off. So my general thing is it doesn't exist, because I don't believe he's completely would do anything like that, just for his own protection. Besides, the whole idea was stupid anyhow. What they're not mentioning is that the election challenge, for instance, the the chairman of this committee had actually engaged in an election challenge against George W. Bush in 2004, the one where he did win the majority of the popular vote, in which there really was no real dispute they'd won, but, well, I guess the Democrats made up one. So actually, Trump is not the first of this game, of disputing these elections in the modern era. I mean, prior to him, of course, is Al Gore's month-long dispute of the election, which ultimately ended in a Supreme Court decision, which ended attempts to do recounts in selected Democrat-controlled counties and try to throw out votes in order to win. And of course that failed. I had at the time, and I have one of my videos, I said I thought after the Supreme Court decided that Trump would stand down. Unfortunately, he didn't. But nonetheless, Trump just took it to a new level, which suggests that there probably does need to be some modification of that voting law, this 1876 law that was being used for the challenges, because basically, I don't know what you do between something like a January the 6th to January the 20th to sort things out if there is a problem. I mean, the time frame between election and final inauguration is so short that if there is a major problem with voting, it's very difficult to actually sort that out in that time frame, which is one reason why Attorney General Barr didn't find anything. But nonetheless, that's the kind of thing you were subjected to in this. A very slanted presentation, partial quotes of what Trump said in the speech, but don't mention the part where he said the protest was peacefully, for instance, and things of that sort. In fact, we don't know the snippets we have of the people that they were shown testifying. We don't know what else was said. We don't know who testified in different directions, and therefore you have a very slanted presentation. And so we'll have to see what, as the polling data comes forward, what the impact that has. I mean, right now, Biden is at a particularly low level in the polls. I think he reached 39%, I believe, on Friday in the Rasmussen, which is my benchmark poll, which I kind of prefer because I think it's more analytical and less human influenced than some of them. And it usually is the most accurate, I think, or one of the most accurate. There's always going to be some poll that's going to be randomly the most accurate, but it tends to be more consistent, I think, over the long haul. And we have a real clear average, politics average of 3.4% advantage for Republicans in the generic congressional ballots. So that'll be another thing. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves after this. But at any rate, that's kind of the way I look at this thing. It's a sham hearing organized by Pelosi against all House precedents and being supported by the mass media as always. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens next. So I'll by the way, the links to my, the addresses of my various social media accounts are listed in the description below. And we'll wrap this one up for now.